Hello, my name is John Adams, and I am a Rent Service Analyst with the Richmond Rent Program. Today's workshop will be on how to change the status of a property, or how to request an administrative determination of inapplicability. In order to create an understanding of how to change the status of a property, I'm going to discuss the four main areas of the process. First, I'm going to define what an administrative determination is and what a change of status means. Second, I'm going to explain the 5 different types of administrative forms, who would file each form, and the difference of what each form seeks to accomplish. Third, I'll explain the burden of proof and offer some examples of documentation that you might need to include. And finally, I'll show you to whom you can send the completed paperwork. Before one can understand the administrative determination process, one must first understand the underlying law that creates the process. The Richmond Fair Rent, Just Cause for Eviction, and Homeowner Protection Ordinance requires that all rental units in the City of Richmond enroll with the rent program and comply with all effective laws, regulations, and required fees. Once enrolled, rental units will be classified as either partially covered and subject to only the just cause portion of the ordinance, or fully covered and subject to both the just cause and the rent control portions of the ordinance. This can be confusing, and if you have questions, please see our workshop titled Rights and Responsibilities for Richmond Landlords and Tenants. The administrative determination, the topic of this workshop, is the process by which the owner of a unit may request for a particular unit an exemption from this law. If granted, the exemption may change the status of a fully covered unit to either partially covered or completely exempt, or change the status of a partially covered unit to completely exempt. It's also important to note that claims are not permanent and may change as the circumstances of the unit change. As the mechanism to change the legal status of the property, the Rent Program has created 5 different forms to accommodate all types of claims. Those 5 forms are listed. First, the Declaration of Owner Occupancy. Second, the request for an administrative determination of inapplicability due to owner occupancy. Third, the request for an administrative determination of inapplicability because the property is not offered for rent, or it is offered but is rent-free. Fourth, the request for an administrative determination of exempt status. And fifth, the petition to determine exempt status. Please understand that this is a legal process, and the Rent Program understands that it may be considered complicated. If you have questions, the Rent Program offers housing counselors who can assist you. Next, we're going to look at these forms individually and answer the question, which form is right for your situation? The first form is called the Declaration of Owner Occupancy. This form can only be applied to single-family homes or condominiums. This form should be used if the current owner has never rented the property and when the current owner resides at the property as their primary residence. Let's take a look at an example to demonstrate how it works. You recently purchased a house and you received an invoice from the Richmond Rent Program asking you to pay a rental housing fee. You just purchased the house for your primary residence and had no knowledge that the previous owner used the property as a rental. The Rent Program still classifies this property as a rental, and fees may still be owed. You would use the Declaration of Owner Occupancy to claim full exemption from the rental ordinance. The second form is called the Request for Administrative Determination of Inapplicability due to owner occupancy. This form would be used when the current owner had previously rented the unit and, after a vacancy, has decided to occupy that unit as their primary residence. As an example, the tenants formerly residing in one of 2 units of a duplex were evicted for non-payment of rent. This is a just cause for eviction. The owner decides to occupy the now vacant unit as their primary residence. The owner would claim full exemption for the occupied unit of the duplex with the request of inapplicability due to owner occupancy. The second currently rented unit would remain fully covered. The third form is the most complicated and the one that we often receive the most questions about. It is called the Request for Administrative Determination of Inapplicability due to the unit not being available for rent or due to the owner collecting no rent. This form would be used when the owner is not receiving rent for the unit. There are 2 cases in which rent would not be collected. The first is when the unit is not available. An example of a unit not being available could be when a unit is undergoing major renovations. Please note that not available does not necessarily coincide with vacant. Units left vacant for vacancy's sake or awaiting to be sold may not qualify for exemption. It is the purpose of this form to allow the owner to make that request and to receive a determination. The second case is when the unit is occupied but the landlord collects no rent. When considering this claim, it is important to understand the definition of rent. Rent is defined as all periodic payments and all non-monetary considerations. This definition means that most labor or indirect support that benefit the owner will be considered rent. Examples of rent include, but are not limited to, tenant labor, maintenance, and payment of property taxes. Let's take a look at an example. A father and an owner of a property would like to allow his daughter to live in the unit. The father owner collects no rent. That is, the father owner pays the mortgage, the taxes, all the maintenance, and collects no money and requires no maintenance. If the father owner would like to claim an exemption, he would need to file the administrative determination of inapplicability due to the unit not being available for rent or due to the owner collecting no rent. If in this example, the father owner required that the daughter pay the mortgage, that payment would be considered rent, a tenancy would be established, and all applicable laws, protections, and fees would apply. The fourth form is called the Request for Administrative Determination of Exempt Status. This form would be used to change the status of any unit in which the circumstances of that unit has changed or in which the rent program has the status misenrolled. For example, you recently purchased a property with 2 units, a main house and an unpermitted second dwelling unit, or an ADU. You plan to rent out both units, and both units are currently listed as fully covered with the rent program. Before you rent out the ADU, you reconstruct it with a proper ADU permit as issued by the City of Richmond's Building Department. The ADU should now be considered partially covered. You would use this form to claim the exemption for the ADU from rent control and make the ADU subject to only the just cause portions of the rent ordinance. The final form is called the Petition to Determine Exempt Status. You would use this form if you filed an administrative determination and your change of status was denied. You may file this petition to appeal the denied determination. After receiving the denial, you would have up to 30 days to file your petition. The petition would go before the rent program's hearing examiner. Example: a rent program administrator determined your claim of full exemption for not available for rent was insufficient and denied your request. You may appeal the decision through the petition process. All claims for administrative determination of exempt status will require a minimum of 2 types of documentation: the correct and properly filled out form, which we just discussed, and evidence to support that claim. All claims place the burden of proof on the applicant. This means that in addition to the form, the applicant must add additional documentation to support this claim. This evidence must support the claim to the threshold that it convinces the administrator that the claim is more believable than not. Most denials and delays are due to lack of proper supporting documentation. There are many different types of supporting documentation the applicant could include. The 5 types of determinations discussed earlier request slightly different variations. But generally speaking, the applicant will need to supply proof that they are in fact the owner and proof of the claim that they are making. Examples of proof include the following: the grant deed of the property, 4 consecutive months of one of the following: the PG&E bill, the cable bill, or bank statements, insurance policies, notarized statements, moving receipts, and a post office change of address. Once the applicant has filled out the correct form and gathered all their supporting documentation, it just becomes a matter of filing the paperwork. All forms can be found on our websites, and all submissions can be made by coming in person to the Richmond Rent Program offices located at 440 Civic Center Plaza on the 2nd floor, or via mail attention to the Billing and Registration Department at the Richmond Rent Program at 440 Civic Center Plaza, Suite 200, or via email to rent@ci.richmond.ca.us. Once we have your submission, the property will be marked as under review, and it will be assigned to a rent program administrator who will make the determination about the change of status. Properties under review do not accrue late fees or other penalties. Once having made the determination, the administrator will write their findings and determinations in a brief and send a copy to the applicant. Please be aware that the review process can take up to several months. We ask for patience and continued communication throughout the review process. Thank you for taking the time to learn about the process of changing the status of a property and how to request the administrative determination of inapplicability. If you have any more questions, feel free to call us at 510-234-7368 or visit our website and make an appointment. This concludes our workshop, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.